Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Pereira. The Supreme Court on Friday directed the Karnataka government to release 177.25 TMC feet of Cauvery water to Tamil Nadu from its interstate Bengaluru dam. The judgment clarified that Karnataka will now have an enhanced share of 14.75 TMC feet water per year, while Tamil Nadu will get 404.25 TMC feet, which will be 14.75 TMC feet less than what was allotted by the tribunal in 2007. Earlier, in accordance with the 2007 award of the Cauvery Water Dispute Tribunal, Karnataka had a share of 270 TMC feet of Cauvery water. This will now increase to 284.75 TMC feet. The much-awaited judgment was pronounced by a bench comprising Chief Justice Deepak Misra and Justices Amitava Roy and A.M. Kanvilkar, which had on September 20th last year reserved the verdict on the appeals filed by Karnataka, Tamil Nadu and Kerala against the 2007 award of the tribunal. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyze the Cauvery verdict. Joining me on the program today are S. Srinivasan, Senior Journalist, R.K. Misra, Member, Chief Minister's Vision Group for Bengaluru, and Professor C.K. Varshney, Environmentalist. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. Srinivasan, I'd like to begin with you, of course. As far as the verdict itself is concerned, what do you make of the Apex Court's verdict on the Cauvery issue?
You see, it's been a protracted battle between the two states. And, the problem itself is over, centuries old. But, after the 2007 award, there has been several more court rounds. And finally, it appears that this is a final verdict on the whole issue. There is no appeal on this. They can only go for if there is any, it's been made very clear that this is a final judgment. Tamil Nadu can go for, some review, but it won't be beyond factual corrections. There won't be any hearing again on this. That's one. Therefore, in a way, it kind of brings a certain closure to the whole issue, which has been pending there. But that is technically. The other issue is that Tamil Nadu has been for long demanding that there should be a mechanism for managing the whole thing. So therefore, the Cauvery Management Board is going to come up because earlier, even when the judgments had come out, there was no mechanism that it would be implemented on the ground. Karnataka had not implemented earlier decisions. That's a complaint which has come from Tamil Nadu. So that issue should be taken care of. And overall, the court has made a broad statement, an opening statement, which says that, water is a national asset. And therefore, it should not be claimed by one state or the other. By saying that, the principal, theory which Karnataka applied of absolute territorial integrity over, territorial right over that kind of goes. So there are many things which has come out in the judgment.
Sure. Now, let me go across to Dr. Misra first and see what he has to say about the point that you're making just now about how Karnataka has not adhered to some of these orders in the past. So what's to say that it will not happen again, Dr. Misra?
I think Karnataka had been in a real distress situation, and many times it was almost impossible for Karnataka to adhere to the order. But there is no justification for not adhering to it. But given that today's verdict, which Karnataka has welcomed across the party lines, across the organizations, and I don't see any such challenge going forward. And as Supreme Court has very clearly said that water does not belong to a state, water belongs to the nation. It's a natural resources, and which needs to be shared equally by the citizens of India, not the citizens of Karnataka, not the residents of Bangalore or residents of Chennai. From that point of view, given that it has received a very positive response from the Karnataka, both government and the political class, I don't see any repeat of such non-compliance of the SC order.
Sure. Okay. Let me bring in Professor Varshney into the picture. Now, Professor, under the present circumstances, would you say that this is the best verdict that has come out?
I think I will welcome this because it settles a long-lasting dispute of over 100 years. And water is a very critical issue. So I think there are two things which become very clear. Number one, that the water is a resource which has to be shared rather than to be claimed by someone of any of the riparian state. So I think this is very, very important. And this will be, to my mind, will be guiding point for many other river dispute or interstate disputes we have. So I think this is a very, very fundamental piece of the judgment. The other thing which is very important is that in Bengaluru, of course, the drinking water is the first priority that has also been restated by the court, and which is also a fact. But the question is that this water is becoming increasingly a very, very precious resource. And in the future, it will even become more precious because of the climate change and changing mood and the pattern of the rainfall. So in any case, the amount of water that is allocated either to Tamil Nadu or to the Karnataka or to the Bengaluru city is going to fall short of the requirement if we do not mend our ways. So my feeling is that somewhere the water Cauvery board which is going to be established as required should look into the water efficiency measures, both in agriculture as well as in the city, because recycling of water becomes very important. I was expecting that there is going to be some reference to this also, that all the interest in state should really look into increasing water efficiency both in agriculture as well as recycling of water in the domestic.
And that's very important.
And that's very important. It has to be done. It has to be done. Otherwise, our water requirement is going to grow for many reasons. Number one, because of the climate change, temperature is going to increase. So even if the water allocation is increased to any one of them, even then it is going to fall short after a few years. So this is why submission that here, although the judgment has come, and I think this is the best that could have been done, but the important point is that all these states, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Kerala, as well as Puducherry, they have to be very mindful of the water saving and efficiency.
Water is precious. We need to be efficient with it going forward is what you're suggesting.
Yes.
Let me welcome J. Sai Deepak, Supreme Court advocate on the program right now. Welcome, Sai, and thank you for joining me on the program. You know, the Apex Court has very clearly said that 15 TMC or almost 15 TMC of additional water should be granted to Karnataka. What's the rationale behind it?
See, I think from what I understand, the Supreme Court has taken into account the need for the release of this water or the purpose for which it's being sought. And I think the fact that this is being used or this is meant for addressing the drinking water needs of the city of Bengaluru has actually justified this particular reduction from the 2007 position where I think Tamil Nadu was given about 419 TMC feet.
Yes.
Now, for me, the takeaway from this judgment is not just the fact that it settles a certain dispute, but the fact as to whether the state or all the states put together have the political will to implement this particular judgment without letting any politicization of this particular issue. Because I read recently or just a few minutes ago that perhaps celebrations have started in Hosur. And these kind of celebrations have a tendency to take a different turn altogether. In fact, some of my colleagues and friends who are traveling from Bengaluru to Karnataka are asking themselves, should we travel at all in the first place? Rather from Bengaluru to Tamil Nadu, whether or not they should travel in the first place. And that for the last few days since this judgment was anticipated, they've been putting off their plans of travel. And that is the level of fear that is, I think, that is there in the common man. So as far as I'm concerned, the judgment perhaps settles quite a few issues, a long-standing dispute, and it also brings some kind of clarity with respect to addressing riparian disputes. But more than that, I think it's important to see whether the state has the will to implement it. And two, I think, as Sir rightly pointed out, water-related disputes are bound to crop up even more in the future. And each time, do we really need to go to the judiciary to have these issues settled? Is there a way that the states can evolve a mechanism wherein they can address these aspects? Are we actually gearing towards a situation where we realize that water is going to be a precious commodity, and we have these examples of Johannesburg which are staring in our face that's happening? With all this happening around us, what is it that the state as a whole is going to do to address these issues, apart from settling the jurisprudence on water sharing?
True.
So that, I think, is the more important aspect that we need to focus on.
Indeed, indeed. We do need to focus on that, and we'll focus on that in just... Yes, Professor.
Let me tell you that in case of Bengaluru, you see they have got large number of these water bodies. And the way the city manages their water body is very pathetic. Because we can see that Bengaluru Lake, what is happening there. So once you have the water resources, and if you do not care, and then you cry hoarse that we do not have water to drink, it looks very, very unjustified. And I think time has come that we have to respect these water bodies, and we have to respect it very seriously. And then we have to be as self-sufficient in water as possible, because recycling is one such way that you can really increase the availability of water. Because after all, the rainfall is available only for a short period of time, and for most of the time you have to store water.
Sure.
And I think this is the kind of thing that is, in going forward, we have to really work on this very seriously.
You know, what you just said makes a lot of sense. I'm going to take what you're saying to Dr. Misra, because he's a member of the Chief Minister's Vision Group for Bengaluru. Dr. Misra, how would you respond to what Professor Varshney has just said?
Completely agree with him. Two issues I want to highlight. There was a point why Supreme Court agreed to give additional water. I think there was genuine request from Karnataka, given that Bangalore's drinking water needs, Bangalore has grown a city of 1.3 crore people now. Drinking water needs were not being met. And whatever we do in today's situation, lakes, our Bangalore lakes have really been poorly managed, and as Mr. Varshney said, and the government is conscious about it. What government is trying to do is, so far why the lakes are in poor state, because government is not able to treat the sewage water. Only 40 to 50% of sewage water of Bangalore is being treated. Remaining 40 to 50% ends up going into these lakes, and that's the primary reason for these lakes to be in such pathetic state. Now what is being done right now, the Bangalore Water Supply Board is working on at least 6 to 7 additional large sewage treatment plants, which are planned to come on line by end of this year and early next year. And if all these water treatment plants, once completed, are going to take care of 80 to 90% of the sewage problem of Bangalore. And then these lakes the inlet into the lakes will be having less sewage and less pollutants. And certainly expect these lakes to become not just the water source, but if you have a clean water in the lake and lake is properly desilted, the water table in and around the lake will come up. And Bangalore even today meets almost 40% of its water needs from the groundwater. Cauvery water is not sufficient still. Cauvery water supplies only to 50 to 60% of the core Bangalore area. Outlying areas don't even have the Cauvery water lines, and so it is completely supplied by the borewells. Unfortunately, borewells, because of the water table going down, are not being replenished because our lakes are silted, so no water percolation happens, and mostly those are sewage lakes.
Okay, so efforts are being made is what you're suggesting, and in due course of time, the lake water too will be used for Bangalore's consumption. Yes, sir, you wanted to say something.
See, there's just one point that perhaps we need to consider. So today, the city of Bangalore has a certain amount of need in terms of its growing population. What are we supposed to do 15 years down the line again? Will we revisit this situation? Because at the end of the day, I think one of the problems that we face, and I think India in general faces, is the lack of clear urban planning. Which means these cities will continue to mushroom and they'll continue to take on truckloads of people, hundreds of thousands of people from the hinterland and rural places will pour into these cities. So that's again bound to create a situation where we'll have to revisit this current judgment about 15 years later or 20 years later, whatever happens. So I think it's important for us to understand that if we could actually focus on urban planning and see if our existing cities are in a position to continue taking on more people. If they are not, can we have satellite cities? Is there a way that we can disperse the population a bit? Because if that doesn't happen, this is perhaps just an issue that addresses a current problem, which is bound to recur over and over again. That's point number one. Point number two, I think one of the significant aspects of the judgment is also with respect to the separation of powers of the judiciary and the executive in issues such as these. Which of these is supposed to reign supreme or the legislature as well. So that's a significant aspect of the judgment's discussion. And it requires us to ask ourselves whether for all these aspects, do we need to go to the court of law to settle this issue? Or can the legislature come out with a mechanism which addresses these aspects? Can we have a law which addresses water disputes in general? Can we have a mechanism which applies to the whole country? So on that aspect, perhaps this judgment is a good read as well.
Sure, indeed. I want to go back, Srinivasan, to a point that Sai Deepak was making during his opening remark about, the political messaging really, or what the political implications of this verdict are going to be in both Karnataka and in Tamil Nadu.
Sure. I'll come to that, but before that, I want to take a point which he said, if you allow me.
Yes, sure,
It's
please.
about, the justification which has been given by giving more water to Bengaluru is that Bangalore requires more water, which is there. But then there are two studies. One says that 50% of water wastage happens in Bengaluru. The second thing is the catchment area itself, Bangalore, on the overall Cauvery basin, and if you take all, it's a very small portion. But then it was necessary that water be given to them. Obviously, this is going to raise questions. Already, the farmers of Delta in Tamil Nadu are raising a question. You have seen them coming to Delhi protesting very creatively here. They donned, they skull and other things around their neck, and they did various kinds of things. I mean, their point is when the terms of trade are against farmers, when there is a certain rural distress, over 100 farmers have died there during drought. Now, this issue is going to come up again. That there is a certain feeling which is going to be there that have we lost out? The farmers are going to question that, and that's going to put a pressure on the government.
Just to broaden the scope, farmers are not just dying in Tamil Nadu, there are farmers dying in other parts of the country as well. So don't we need to take this as a
Exactly.
holistically and see what needs to be done?
So coming to that, like a gentleman said from Bangalore that they're going to create more STPs. Now look at a city like Delhi. There is Yamuna, and there's a promise that there will be sewage treatment plants and therefore the water will be treated. But you go to lakhs of citizens living along Noida, Yamuna, along the settlement along the Yamuna, they are actually breathing toxic air because it's not being properly filtered and cleared. So the implementation really is a question, how it is going to be implemented. And you are investing a lot in urban, which need to, I'm not against it, like he correctly said, there need to be a proper urban planning. That's, because otherwise you can't just, trying to balance one
we have
against
the
other.
Smart Cities program at the moment. Let's hope that, something good comes out of it and we do get to see some urban planning or some better urban planning in the days to come. But, you still didn't answer my question about the political implications.
Thing is, it's going to be very tough for Edapadi. Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu, because already, they're going to complete 1 year. They are completed 1 year, and the celebrations have certainly been soiled by this. So he's going to come under tremendous pressure because already his detractors within the party and the DMK outside are putting pressure on him. So there'll be another point that they have not been able to do something on NEET, they have not been able to do something on GST, and there will be more pressure on him. Now, even BJP is now beginning to say, the leaders in Tamil Nadu begin to say that law and order problem is also there in Tamil Nadu. So obviously the government is going to come under pressure. But more important, elections are going to come in Karnataka. And it really now, it's how Siddaramaiah is going to use this issue. Siddaramaiah seems to have very, tackled this Cauvery issue in a very different manner. No, he's been one who passed a resolution in the assembly and he's been opposing the judgment. He has not been implementing it. Actually, he'll go to town with this, that look, I got this for you. So
in an election year, it helps him, is what you're suggesting.
It helps him. So it really, this is going to have a lot of political implication.
Yes, Sai, very quickly, and then let me go across to Bangalore.
There's one thing that Sir has just mentioned, which I think is extremely relevant. The entire history of the litigation starting from 1890 and subsequently onwards, if you take a look at it, especially in the recent years.
1990 onwards.
Yes, no, even in fact.
More recently, 1990 onwards, yes.
The problem is, I think it's a textbook instance of violation of rule of law by the states themselves. Okay, and that is a troubling aspect, where resolutions are being passed in the parliament or in the assembly against the judgment. And I'm just unable to understand that when state governments and states do these kind of activities, what kind of a message are they sending to the common population? And the second thing is, perhaps the Supreme Court could have commented on these aspects and also focused on how do you make an example out of those parties, even state parties, if they happen to violate the terms of a certain judgment. As long as the judgment is in force and it's not stayed or violated, or has not been vacated, all parties are supposed to respect it and they're bound by it, they're supposed to follow it. What is the sanction against a state party which does not follow a judgment? That's a question that needs to be answered. Second,
Indeed.
As Sir rightly mentioned, Karnataka has an election year and Tamil Nadu also is going through a churn in terms of politics. So this is going to be seen as another failure on the part of the state, apart from its multiple failures at this point of time in protecting the interests of the people. So this gives all people who are interested in making their presence felt in Tamil Nadu, as far as the political arena is concerned, an opportunity to say, look, this is another instance where the government has failed, the system has failed, nobody cares, the government is on a leave of absence.
So difficult times ahead as far as the AIADMK or the Tamil Nadu government is concerned. Okay, moving on now. Let's talk about water, being a very extremely precious resource and something that the professor spoke about in his opening comment. Dr. Misra, what needs to be done both by farmers as well as urban cities like Bengaluru and Chennai going forward to ensure that we use more water efficient ways to save or conserve water?
I think it's a very important question, and I heard our colleagues here on the panel about the politics of it, and I'm sure politicians across the world will use anything they can get their hands on, and which is understood, and that's what democracy is all about. Only thing we as citizens need to be very careful and not get waylaid by these emotional issues. On coming to the question, I think there are two very important points. For example, in water-starved states, even in Karnataka, for example, Mandya region, there is a huge, a growth of water-sucking crops like sugarcane. Now, sugarcane has been declared as a crop which is absolutely not suitable for areas where water is not in plenty. Same thing has happened in Maharashtra. Go to Vidarbha region. It's drought-prone, but Maharashtra is the biggest producer of sugarcane after Uttar Pradesh. So I think the crop pattern of the farmers have to change. Similarly, in Tamil Nadu, I think Tamil Nadu also needs to go for the rice varieties which do not need that much water, and paddy by and large needs a lot of water. So they need to look at the crop varieties which need less water and the paddy variety which needs less water. Now, having said that, please understand drinking water needs will always take the precedence over the food needs. Food in Tamil Nadu or Karnataka can be brought from UP or Punjab, but water from UP and Punjab cannot be brought. On the part of Tamil Nadu, there is certain suggestion. See, Tamil Nadu has access to seawater, and Tamil Nadu does not have Western Ghat, so water can be transported. In case of Karnataka, even if you take water from the Mangalore coast, getting it to the places where it is maximum consumed, which is this part of the Western Ghats, is very difficult. So while Bangalore needs to conserve water, Bangalore needs to recycle water, Bangalore needs to reuse water, and we are very conscious of it. And you will see in a year or two, we from the civic society, from the government, we are putting tremendous pressure on the government to clean up this act, get the lakes fixed. Actually, around 40 odd lakes have already been cleaned up and they are being maintained properly.
I want to go to Professor. I want to go to Professor Varshney because I've got limited time, Dr. Misra, about a point that you're making about desalination plants, Professor Varshney. How viable are they, and can we have desalination plants and ensure that we can, see our water needs being met through that means?
See, the viability of desalination plants depends upon the situation, on the location. Because if the water becomes so scarce that the commercial price of the water becomes so high, desalination becomes very, very convenient. And I think Tamil Nadu is already having one. And the present day relief in the Tamil Nadu is only because of desalination, which is working fine. But the point is that desalination requires huge amount of energy, and also it is expensive, and maintenance is also a problem because filters have to be changed and so on.
But
without going into this, I would like to say the more important thing is to maintain the watershed by having it properly vegetated, so that the mantle or the tapestry of the green plants can really conserve water and save water from evaporation, loss and flood.
Okay.
Because Bengaluru also floods very frequently.
Sure.
And all this is happening because we have not managed the vegetation cover in our watersheds.
Okay.
And if we do that...
Very quick closing comment from Sai Deepak. Is the Cauvery issue now a closed chapter? Has the fire been doused, or are we going to see more of this in the years to come?
I think this is not a closed chapter yet. Perhaps it's a closed chapter for now. I don't see this ending so soon. And I just want to answer some other point which Sir had mentioned. These are all internal factors, but there is an external factor that also decides a lot of your crop planning. So, for instance, if there is a demand for a rice like basmati rice from Europe, the Middle East and other places, then a lot of farmers in this country, in places where basmati is cultivated, in limited places, are bound to switch to basmati. This is happening in Punjab, this has been happening in Haryana and other places. Districts which have never cultivated basmati in the past have suddenly switched to basmati.
Sure.
This translates to switching to a crop which is water intensive. So,
all right.
Therefore, there is a real problem here, and crop planning also plays an important role, which is driven by external factors.
Okay.
Urban planning and water planning, both are important.
Urban planning and water planning are both important, and that's what we need to concentrate on going forward, is what our guests here are suggesting. With that, it's a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective. For us, that's it from me. See you again next time.